let's go ahead and get the first talk started. We got Larry Wolfgang up first, and what Larry's going to do is tell us about how to writing for publication. It's not rocket science. And we asked Larry to give this talk because we're all very good at experimenting, building, and showing off, but we seem to be a little reluctant to write about it. So it's very important that all of the work that you're doing gets documented and gets published. So Larry's going to help us with that. Come on up, Larry.
Thanks, Steve. Well, I guess this is an opportunity for a bit of a commercial. I like being first on the program because at this point you don't really have any other presentations to compare me with. So thanks for that. And hopefully most of you are awake, and by the end, maybe some of you will still be awake. So thanks for your attention. In being the QEX editor, I feel a great opportunity to come to the DCC to meet with so many of you. And I hope that most of you are already QEX readers, and I know that some of you are also QEX authors. But this is an opportunity to meet with folks and to talk about my magazine, and also to invite authors or potential authors to consider writing for QEX or any of the ARRL publications. I won't be exclusive to QEX, but I do want to encourage that very much. Okay, so I'm Larry Wolfgang WR1B. I'm the QEX editor, senior assistant technical editor, and also the QST technical correspondence editor. And today we're going to talk about writing for publication. And as I said, it's not rocket science, even if it is rocket science that you're writing about. There's a couple of places that you can turn to as resources. First of all, I'm sure you're all familiar with the ARRL webpage. And when you look at that webpage, you'll notice over on the right-hand side, halfway down the page, there's a set of logos for our three publications: QST, our membership journal, the National Contest Journal, and QEX. If you click on any of those, you'll go to a separate page for that publication. And so the QEX page, is kind of the place to go for information about QEX and what do we do. Every issue, we've generally got some articles that have additional files, whether it's program files or simulations or something, and we make those available, and there's a click there that's for downloadable files, and it'll take you to a place where you can find all of those. There's a lot of writing here. Some of this needs to be revised. Probably some of it needs to go away. But there is a little bit of section about how to write and gives you sort of an author's guide viewpoint. Some of the things I'm going to talk about today are covered there. Some of the things I'm going to talk about today are probably contradictory, and eventually some of that should change. Another thing you'll find on the QEX webpage is the latest cover image, as well as a number of previous issues going back, I think at this point, a little more than 2 years. And with the cover image, you also have the table of contents. We've added recently the letters column, so you can download those as PDF files to look at that if you don't receive the magazine. And we also always have at least one sample article. So it can give you a little bit of an idea of what's in QEX and what we're about. I mentioned the author's guide, and there's quite a bit of information there about that. All right, so the big question is, who can write an article? Well, the fact is, we'll allow just about anybody to write for ARRL publications. There's not a long list of prerequisites or anything like that. So whether you're an experienced writer or whether you're a first-timer, you can write for ARRL. It really is fairly easy. The idea is pick a topic with which you're very familiar and write about it. If you're passionate about something, you're going to be able to come up with some ideas and put them on paper. Whether it's that project, whether it's some technical topic that you want to discuss, you can pretty much, if you're passionate about it, you can write something. And getting started, I think, is usually the hard part. There is a small carrot that we dangle out there. For QEX articles, authors are paid at $50 per published page, and QST authors are paid at $65 per published page. And I will point out that QEX articles tend to be longer than QST articles, so there's the potential to make more money if you write for QEX. It's not going to make you rich, but it might help pay for a couple of ICs or something for the next project. All right, so you've decided to start. Where do you begin? Well, I generally find that it's helpful to start at the beginning. Now, some people like to start in the middle or even at the end, but I think if you start at the beginning and recognize you want to write about this, then you're off to a good start. I suspect that most of us keep a notebook when we're experimenting or building a circuit, and so we kind of document where we've been, what mistakes we've made, what sorts of things we might do different next time, things like that. So in the notebook, we keep the documentation. You know, as we're getting to the point of having a working circuit and we're making adjustments and making measurements, calibration procedures, we probably make some notes about that. And this is going to help when you're later trying to write. Also take pictures. You know, I think we tend to forget about that. You're in the process of putting a project together, developing something, and a lot of times it's helpful to have some pictures along the way. That can be good for an article, but it can also be good for your notebook documentation. If you take a picture, you've got a clear image of where you were as you progress through the project. All right. The next question is, when do you write the article? Well, I think there's a couple of times. The obvious time is when you've completed the project. When you have a working model, you know, and you feel that this is ready to share, that's a good time to write an article. But there are other times. It may be that you've come to a sticking point. It may be that you've run into a problem that you don't quite know how to solve. And that's also a possible time to write an article, to share what you've done with your fellow hams and ask for their input. Where do I go next? What else do I need to do to either get this working or to extend the operation? Another very common question, should I write for QST or QEX? Well, you know, first of all, people think QST, great, that's a really big audience. And so I'd really like to write for QST. Now, I could write for QEX, but, you know, it's only about 7,000 subscribers, so it's a much smaller readership. I'd rather write for QST. That's fine. I would say, don't worry about that. Let us worry about that. Let us decide where your article will best be suited. And we do review articles with that in mind. Where will be the best place to put this? And I'll just cover very briefly, you know, the process of getting an article published. Now, after you've written and submitted your manuscript, we're going to review that, technical editors, and also it's posted to a website where our technical advisors have an opportunity to look at it. And I'm not sure, are there any technical advisors in the room? Hopefully a few. All right. Technical advisors are people that have a particular expertise in some aspect of amateur radio and who are willing to share that. And this is one way we ask them to share their expertise. Take a look at it. It's our version of a juried publication. You know, we ask your peers to take a look at your work and see if it really has technical merit or if there are problems. A lot of times I look to their comments for ideas on maybe something that needs to be clarified or maybe needs a little more explanation in an article. So we're going to review the article. We're going to look at the comments that the technical advisors have posted for us. And then we're going to get together and talk about the articles and kind of decide, is this, first of all, is this something we can use? And sometimes an article comes in and it just frankly isn't something that we can make use of. But more often, we're looking at QST, QEX, maybe NCJ. Sometimes an article, particularly because of its graphic presentation, really needs maybe the web as a place where it's best presented. So we'll take a look at that. We might even look at something and say, this should be included in an antenna book or a handbook. And so it might be directed that way as well. Important point. When you're going to submit an article for publication, send it to one publisher at a time. Don't kind of shotgun the whole amateur radio publication world. Decide the best place that you'd like to submit it first. And I'm here to talk about ARRL publications, but Joe Lynch is here to talk to us about CQVHF. And that's an excellent place to have an article published. So you can make a decision where you might like to submit it first. And if it's to send it to Joe, please do. We won't be offended. We hope you'll write something else for QST or QEX. But if you send it to both of us, and especially if you don't tell us, later on we're going to run into a real problem because we can't both publish the same article because of copyright issues. Chances are we're going to remember you the next time you send something in. Okay? All right, so we're going to decide how we can best use your article. And at that point, you'll be notified. It might be a phone call, probably an email, and you will receive a publications release form. And this is kind of one of the questions on the publications release form is, did you submit this anywhere else? Or has it been published anywhere else? Now, having been published somewhere else doesn't necessarily rule it out. It may mean that we need the permission of another publisher, and we do sometimes reprint articles from other publications. But it's a place where that's going to come out. So we ask that you fill out the release form, sign it, date it, and send it back to headquarters. And at that point, we can proceed with your article. All right, so what should you submit? Well, the obvious. We want a manuscript that's typed. Handwritten articles are difficult. Maybe if it's a short note or a letter, maybe we can work with that. But we really want something, and we want, a computer file. We say formatted for 8.5 by 11 paper, leave reasonable margins and so forth. And just kind of standard so that it can be printed out and looked at and reviewed. It would be really helpful if you put a header on every page so that when it is printed, we can identify it. Hopefully your name, maybe at least part of the title. I would say the date. It could be a date when you finished writing the article, or you started writing the article, or the latest revision to your article, or when you send it to us. That doesn't really matter. But it should have a date. And it should also have a page number. I don't know if any of you have ever been in this situation. I'm a district advancement chairman for my district in the Boy Scout Council. I get to review a lot of Eagle projects. And a lot of those, too many of those projects come to me as kind of paper-clipped sheets of paper. And you take the paper clip off and you go to shuffle something, and next thing you've got this stack of papers scattered across the floor, and you have to try to reassemble the package. It's frustrating. It's time-consuming, and it's annoying. So, when the name and a page number are on each sheet, it's much easier to put it back into order when that happens. And yes, we do most of our work with computer, and we don't tend to scatter the pages, but it does help. Why the date of, article writing or submission or something on there? Well, it's very likely that after you've submitted the manuscript and we've accepted it, and maybe the editor has started working on it, you're going to think of some changes that should have been made. And so what a lot of authors will do is fire off a revision. Oh, I thought of some other things, and so here's the latest manuscript. And so now, I've got 2 different copies of the manuscript on my computer. And then about the time I start working on the second copy, a third one will come. And then, pretty soon it gets hard to tell, which was the latest one, which one am I working with. So if I've got a date in the file, not just the date on the file, but one in the file, it's a lot easier to decide. So it does help. All right, we're going to prepare a manuscript. And just a few things to keep in mind. Use standard abbreviations where appropriate, AC, DC, things like that, abbreviated units and so forth. If you've got some acronyms, it's almost always better to spell them out first and then give the acronyms, infinite impulse response filter, IIR. That way, those people who do know will gloss over it. Those people who don't know will have it right there. And while you're intimately familiar with all these terms, not all of your readers, or maybe not your editor, will be. Use the standard character set on whatever program you're using. And we use Microsoft Word for our manuscript preparation, but you can submit in practically any word processing format that you can imagine. If we can't convert it, we'll ask you to send us, a different format. But generally, almost any word processor we can deal with and convert it for our work. If you've got some symbols that need to go in there, you can either use a symbol font, or you can do something like set it off with dollar signs. I mean, dollar signs and words aren't something we'll normally see, so it sort of jumps out, here's something that needs to be taken care of. And that's a pretty simple thing to do when we're editing the manuscript to make sure that comes out okay. I would say, footnote references go in the text, generally at the end of the sentence, but you can put it anywhere you want, I'll move it. But it should be there. The easiest thing is just as a superscripted number, sequential. The first note should be footnote number 1, the second one should be number 2. And then the actual notes go at the end of the article. Don't try to get too fancy with us. This is a manuscript, it's not a typeset article. Every figure should have a text reference. So if you're talking about the certain schematic, you can make reference to it. If you're talking about a photo of the circuit board, you can make reference to it. Just include a little note that says, see figure 2, see figure 5, and so on. The actual figure captions or tables or notes all go at the end, but the references should be sequential throughout the article. If you've got some sketches or schematic diagrams and so forth, try to make them as clear as possible. It doesn't matter if they're hand-drawn or you've got a CAD program or something. Just try to make sure that we're going to be able to read it when it comes in. I've seen quite too often, somebody used a program that converted to PDF or something, and you can't really tell, was that a 6 or an 8, or maybe it was a 9, and you're trying to read component values. So take a look at it before you send it and try to make sure that's clear for us. We're not asking you to send us professional line drawings when you're submitting the schematic diagram. In almost every case, our graphics arts department will redraw your artwork. And so that way we use a consistent set of symbols, a consistent style throughout all of our publications. But they have to be able to work from the diagrams that you send in. If you've got an electronic format, include it. Again, we can open most every graphics file format one way or another, so that's helpful. How do you send it in? Well, we really like receiving things by email. So, and a file attachment, if you've got an article that's got a whole bunch of photos that are high resolution and the file starts getting really big, you can zip them into several pieces, a couple of photos at a time. Then when you send the email, put a note in the header or the body of the text that says, this is file 1 of 4. 2 of 4, and so forth. Then we know once we've got all 4 of them, we've got the whole article. So QEX@ARRL.org, QST@ARRL.org. Either way, it's going to go into the review process. If it's really too big, send us a data disk, send us a CD, and we can read that. Now, a lot of authors think, they're going to do us this great big favor, and they're going to format the article so that it's just ready to print. And that actually works very well for the conference proceedings, where we take whatever you send us and we put that in and send it to the printer. But for the magazines or book publications, that doesn't work very well. Again, we're trying to have a uniform style, a uniform layout technique, and so forth. So we're going to do the layout professionally. And even if you're a professional layout artist, we're going to do it anyway, because we want it to be in our style. I mentioned that we prepare our manuscripts using Microsoft Word. We send that to our typesetting production department, and then they use the Adobe InDesign program currently to do the page layouts. Okay? If you've got Adobe InDesign and you think, wow, I can do the layout in InDesign and just send them my InDesign files. Well, first of all, I can't edit your InDesign files, so it doesn't help me. And secondly, even if you think it looks like a QEX page, at some point it's going to have to, the format's going to have to be changed. At some point there's going to have to be some editing work done, and that's going to make it more difficult for the whole process. So we ask you, don't do that. A lot of people, again, trying to make the article look like they want it to be printed, they want to put the graphic file, whether it's a schematic or a photo or whatever, right there in the article. Here's where it should be. This is where figure 2 is referenced, and this is where it should be. Well, we can tell when you said see figure 2, we know it should be around here somewhere. But when you put it in there, and I don't understand this about Word, but when you put it in there, all we can do is delete it. We can't really recover it. I guess it does some compression or something. It does something so that if I try to save your file back out as a separate graphic, it always has lower resolution than we need. And I've tried this a number of different ways and a number of different times, and I've even tried fooling production, and they always come and say, where did you get this? This is lousy. We can't use it. So we have to go back. So, it really doesn't help. It just means that I've got to go and delete it and sort of keep track of it or something. If you've got the graphics, put them into separate files. And it could be photos, it could be schematics, whatever. But you can put them in there. The general rule is that a photo needs to be 300 dots per inch at the printed size. And so 300 dots per inch is not super high resolution. Most of you are probably using digital cameras. If you don't use a digital camera, can you still send photos in prints or something? Yeah, we can scan. We can scan slides or negatives or prints, as the case may be. We can do that. But most of you are probably going to submit digital photos. Set your camera to take the highest resolution it will, and send us that file. We probably don't need you to set your high-end digital SLR to RAW mode or something like that. But if you did that, we'd work with it. Okay, but just the highest resolution JPEG or something, and it's almost certain to be acceptable that way. All right, so we've accepted your article, and now we've got to the point where it's being scheduled. I'm going to let you know that I've got the article scheduled for QEX. I'm going to send you a copy of the edited manuscript. And when I send you a copy of the edited manuscript, basically I'm asking you to take a look at this and make sure I didn't introduce any errors. Editors do that all the time. I mean, not intentionally, but it happens. So, you can let me know, hey, this was right the way it was. Why did you change it? Whatever. Editors are always happier when they've got their finger in the pie and kind of messed around a little bit anyway. So It's almost guaranteed that we're not going to take your submission word for word and print it. It happens occasionally, but usually we'll find a few things, some apparent grammatical errors or something that we'd like to fix. So I'll give you a chance to look at it. And then, the other common thing is, now it's been a couple of months, so you read through it again and you say, did I say that? Oh, well, I didn't mean that. Okay, tell me. This is a good time. Probably what will happen is the first time I see a page layout from the production department, I'll just mark those little changes. Maybe it's a sentence has to be changed, maybe it's a paragraph has to be added, something like that. But we will make those changes. But it's fairly easy at that stage. We're going to go through a couple of iterations of looking at typeset copy, finding typos, trying to get things straightened out at the production time. We will also send you a PDF file of the final page layout. And that sounds pretty final, the final page layout. Well, what we're saying is, unless you've got some problems here, this is how it's probably going to look when we send it to the printer. Sometimes there will still be a change because an ad had to fit on that page or something, so there may be some slight differences when you actually see the magazine. But this is the time to say, oh, I forgot, there's something else needs to go in here, or oh, I didn't see this earlier, but let's change these 3 words. I think it'll make more sense, that kind of thing. The only catch is PDFs always come out about the time we're trying to get the issue out to the printer, and try as I might, I can't seem to get around that. The earlier I turn articles in, the longer it takes to get them back, because everybody's working on other publications and there's a lot going on. So when it becomes a priority, then it becomes a priority. So at the PDF stage, you're not going to get a lot of opportunity, not a lot of time to comment. And if you come back and tell us, oh no, this figure needs to be moved over here and something else, and we need to add 3 more paragraphs, now we've got a problem because we're ready to go to print and you're making extensive changes. It hasn't really happened with me on QEX, but I've seen it happen other times. The answer is, okay, we'll have to hold it till next issue. And now we've got this gaping hole. Something else has to go in here that we hadn't really planned on. But we don't get to that point very often. Hopefully we won't with any of your articles. Okay. I know my article was accepted. I know it's ready to go to the printer. When am I going to see the magazine? This is the hard part. I mean, this may be harder than writing. Waiting to actually see the magazine. Well, it will come. Be patient. I will also tell you that authors get a couple of extra copies mailed after they come back from the printer. So yes, you will get a few copies to show to your friends or maybe give to your mother or something. And so, you have that. And if you need a few more, I mean, we're not going to send you a box, but, if you need 3 or 4 instead of 2, let us know. We'll be happy to accommodate because you're an author and we want you to be happy and write for us again. Another thing that a lot of people don't really understand or don't really think about is publication schedules. This week we sent the November QST to the printer. All right. By October 1st, I should be sending the November-December QEX to the printer. And it's probably going to slide a few days, but that's the goal. So we're working months ahead of time on preparing articles. And that sort of adds into that time delay and the, I'm anxious to see it kind of feeling. But it will get there. The last thing I guess I want to leave you with is remember that if you don't write about your project, it's not likely that anybody else will. And so we're asking you to document what you've been doing and share it with your fellow hams. I want to thank you for your attention. And I think we probably have a few minutes for some questions. I see a hand back here.
These days, some of us are documenting our projects basically on the web. And I wonder if, A, there's a problem from a publication perspective of something that's already been made available on the web coming in as an article, and B, if you can accept that, would you want just, or be able to use HTML formatted material or even a link to the website? Or how do you want us to convert that material to make it something usable for you?
Okay, yeah, good question. I'll answer that, I guess, 2 or 3 different ways. First of all, no, having it on your website doesn't preclude other publication in QEX or QST. We would prefer to have something other than HTML. We're going to have to do a conversion because, again, that whole typesetting process goes back to a basic Word document text file. All the hyperlinks and all that sort of stuff has to come out before it actually gets printed. So, we'd prefer if you did a conversion, but that wouldn't, again, make it impossible for us to publish the article. The other aspect of that, maybe it wasn't your direct question, but after the article is published, you can ask for a PDF of the actual printed article to post on your personal website. And we'll accommodate that very easily. So that's another way that it can be shared. In terms of other publication formats or anything, one thing to keep in mind, the copyright laws, you can write about the same topic in much the same way, but write a different article, and that's perfectly fine as well. So, and a lot of times, in fact, I've got an author right now working on a series from some experiments that he had done and has posted on his web page. And he's taking those web page articles and modifying them a little bit and make them a little more suitable for publication in QEX. All right?
Basic question. Do you want Word 2003 or 2007?
Doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. And the other question is, I'm always puzzled. I get QST, for example, but I get it like a month before what the actual month date is on the cover. Why is that? Is that a tradition in the publishing industry? Or is that a stale date? Is it don't sell after this date?
No, I don't think it's a stale date. Most magazines try to have their issue in the hands of their readers a little bit before the month of issue. And I think part of that goes to newsstand distribution, where generally the newsstand distribution will be closer to the actual month. They'll try to get them out so that the newsstand can put them out maybe a couple of days before the month starts. But for the subscribers, you like to have the magazine in their hands ahead of time. The other part of it is that printers have schedules, and so to a large degree you have to fit into their schedule. And QST, for example, is printed by R.R. Donnelley, which is a major publisher of magazines. And we have a window that we have to fit into every month. And come whatever happens, we have to fit into that window. Because if we don't make that window, they've got another magazine with presses ready to roll. So the schedule sort of dictates also when you get it. Generally, I think you should be getting the magazine around the QST, you should be getting around the maybe 18th, 19th, 20th of the month in general, depending on where you are from the mailing distribution center and things like that.
Do you require a copyright assignment on the release form, or just a permission and certification that we actually have the copyright? That I can give you
Good
permission?
question. Yes, we do actually require a copyright assignment. And there are a couple of reasons for that. The first reason, and maybe the easiest one, is that we have agreements with all of the IARU sister societies that any one of us can pick up an article from any of the other sister societies and publish it without any further permission. It also gives us permission to then use that material in other formats. For example, we put together the CD-ROM, the annual periodicals, and so forth. You lost your microphone, but I'll listen.
Would a Creative Commons license to you that allowed all of that be sufficient?
We have worked out some conditions, and I would rather talk about them than blow it off. You know, I mean, a good article is a good article, and you know, we try to find some ways. And it's frequently possible to do that. I've had some articles in QEX over the last year that, you know, we had to sort of work through some copyright issues. And usually it's possible to do that.
What's the word count for a published page? Do you know what the word count would be approximately?
I don't know the word count. I mean, I don't tend to count words. A general rule that I do rely on is if you've formatted the manuscript, or when I've formatted the manuscript page with double-space type and you know, half-inch margins all around and so forth, 3 manuscript pages is about a printed page. Toss in a small graphic or something. So I tend to look at more trying to estimate how many pages this is going to be. Yeah, word count. I mean, is it 2-letter words or 4-letter words or 5-letter words?
Every place I've published, word count has been like God to them, you know. So
yeah.
I just figured which to do.
Yeah, I have an assignment for Steve Ford, you know, for a short takes that I'm writing up, and he wants 900 words. And so when I finished writing what I think I need to say, I'll click on that tool in Word, and you know, it will tell me how many words I have. It'll probably be 1,500, and then I'll have to go and cut some out. But yeah, I'll try to do that. But I don't really use that as a guideline for QEX generally.
You opened the can of worms when you mentioned newsstand distribution. Do you know any newsstands at all that distribute ARRL publications?
Newsstands per se, I don't believe so. We have at various times tried newsstand distribution, and for reasons that I don't really understand, that generally has not worked.
I think it should come out of the public relations budget. They tell me that it's not cost effective, but if you can't find anything about amateur radio on a newsstand anywhere, how are you going to grow the hobby?
Yeah, I will certainly not debate that point with you. I understand the prospect, and I think it's a good point. All I can say is that I know we've tried it over my 27 years at ARRL. I'm aware of at least 2 or 3 times that we sort of made a push to get it on newsstands, and it's always sort of collapsed on itself.
Hi, Larry. Good talk. Thank you. You've motivated me to actually finish an article. I had 2 questions. One, quickly, you said your art people like to redraw charts. Would you rather see just, say, an Excel spreadsheet so that they can draw it from the numbers, or do they like to see a chart that gives an idea of what the author had in mind for displaying?
Now, when you say a chart, are we talking about a graph?
Yeah, say a line graph or a bar chart or something.
It can work both ways. If we have an Excel spreadsheet that has the data, I think that they've got some routine that can take that and manipulate it into AutoCAD. The fellow who currently draws almost all of my QEX drawings refers to tracing. And I have never watched him work to that extent, but a lot of times, he'll say, "Oh yeah, I can trace this," and they come out looking really nice, and that's really what I'm focused on. So, if he's got a graphic file, he will do something with that. If all I have is a printed chart, a graph from a plotter or something, he'll scan it and do something from that. So we work pretty much with the best that we've got available.
Okay, thank you. The second question was, what font size do you want for the manuscript? You don't mention that.
No, I didn't mention that. Most of what I call editing articles for QEX involves a process that's probably better described as formatting. And I don't really want you to worry about that, but when I suck your file into my template in Word, I'm going to go through and highlight subheadings and various things, and I'm going to put it into the style that I call subhead 1, subhead 2, subhead 3. I'm going to highlight the paragraphs of your article and click on what I call body style. And when I do that, it's going to automatically put it into the format that I want it in my manuscript. And by selecting the style names to match what our production department is going to use in InDesign, when they suck my manuscript file into InDesign, it's going to see, oh, this is body style. I know what that is. And it will put it into whatever font, size, style, format they've got defined as well. So it sort of makes it a seamless process. So that's what I'm going to be doing. So if you send it to me in 10-point or 12-point or 20-point type, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to change it. Okay. Wow, I don't see any more questions. I thank you for your attention, and I'll be here all weekend. I'll be very happy to talk with you about any of this process, and especially happy to talk with you about projects that you've been thinking about, or maybe you want to know a little bit more about writing up and submitting. I'll be very happy to talk about that. Thank you.